Hey folks, Brian, we played Elderath last night, and if my accounting is correct, we were on gate session 111. This was after the demon fight. Raymond comes out and says, "It was a miracle!" Wes doesn't think they actually bought that, being the whole ley line fixing thing. Raymond does, however, make an official report to send to the church. Okay, and we start discussing options. What are we going to do? Which reminds me, life plays in the description if you're into that kind of thing. So, there's the Valley Forge. Where did it come from in the system, right? There's the starship in the desert. There's the mentalism cave. There's the fact that there is another ship that at least was in orbit and may still be there. But we decide to investigate the starship in the desert. So Wes, Hjalmar, and Runt take the taxi from the teleportation barn to the islands. And when we arrive, our little pin we use for teleportating and I think talking and stuff starts pinging. Ping, 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 ping. So we've got mail. So there's a number of postings that Wes has of things he can apply to. One is Old Earth culture. There's another seminar on CSA social dynamics. That's done 3 times. Well, each of these seminars are done 3 times weekly, right? There's a dissertations on the Carillion CSA wars. These are ways for us to fulfill our civic responsibilities here in the islands. We're going to get some stuff about civilian programming and calls for working groups, specifically for interacting with the native populations. Wes does provide a diplomatic type response to the negative at this time because we're leaving. Rutt recommends doing some kind of remote thing through the barn, which was a really good idea. And then there was some discussion on actually using holograms, projecting either the students in or us out kind of thing. And that could work. We could make that happen. But then we quickly depart. Okay. While we're doing that, Raymond has the Inquisition. They appear in 3 days. There's Bishop Carter and 2 other priests. They walk into the abbey. The Archbishop has questions, and you are the only one with the answers. He asks, Raymond then asks, "Hey, did you get my report?" And Bishop Carter says, "No, we didn't." And he says, here's a copy. And then Bishop Carter says that he'd like to recuperate a bit, and they can review the document and meet together later. So a couple hours later, they reconvene. And then Bishop Carter and the priest start to drill him. Bishop Carter kind of puts an end to the drilling, but then he asks about Raymond's relationship with Lorath as it correlates to Sylvanus. And Raymond says, "Well, my visions have been, they're like, siblings." One of the priests with him doesn't like that. He gets all kind of pissy like. Carter eyes him down. And then Carter dismisses the priest so that he can converse with Raymond in private. So the 2 leave. And the one who was upset earlier got really angry as he left. Okay, so Carter tells Raymond, "Hey, you are in a most precarious position. There are elements in the church that would find your actions heretical. And proposing that Sylvanus and Lorath are equals." And Raymond starts saying, "Well, no, I didn't say that. There's siblings. There's always an older and a younger sibling. I mean, hey, you don't need to defend your position. I'm on your side here. But there are elements who do not see it that way. And this puts you at risk." And Raymond says, "Hey, well, what do you propose I do from here?" And Carter tells him that the Archbishop and Lady Tamara have found a way to secure your position. And he pulls out a box. And in this box is the frock of a bishop, which he hands to Raymond. He says, "As far as we can tell, this is the safest way forward for you." Raymond says he's very honored, but he's also kind of confused on this. And Carter says, "The militant elements of the Church of Sylvanus, there are militant elements of the Church of Sylvanus." And Raymond takes the vestments, puts them on, and says, please let the Archbishop know of my intent to live up to this responsibility. And Carter tells him, you will most likely be met with adherents who feel out of power. And Raymond says, hey, I don't want to create a schism here, because if we do, then the powers of darkness can take advantage of that. But Carter says, isn't that sort of the purpose of the church, to shine the light on the darkness? He tells them, you will continue to report to me, but under the seal of a bishop. A day later, we arrive. Wes has a letter from Lady Tamara telling him about Raymond's elevation. And then we decide to start provisioning the boat. Next day, somewhere in there we took some time off. Before we provisioned the boat, we took some time off to, oh shoot, where I lost my spot. There we go. We took some time off to get our check marks, that kind of thing. Wes actually went up in his rapier. That was pretty nice. He missed a whole bunch of other ones, though. Okay, so we provisioned the ship for a week's worth of time, and we head out to the desert. Hjalmar, when we get to the desert, because there's mountains, right? Follow the river to the mountains. There's kind of a box. There's mountains to the north, mountains to the west, and mountains off to the east-southeast kind of thing, right? So then there's the desert in between all those mountain ranges, right? Well, we get over the thing, go up to like 6,000 feet, take a look around. We're looking for the ship, right? And Hjalmar sees the rift in the desert, which we knew about because we had previously gone through a gate that came out in a cave in this rift. And we sent Emerald up, and she got there, and she comes back, and all there is desert all around. So we sort of knew this was here. Wes knows, though, that as we go further into the desert, the sand texture kind of changes. The same way that in the ocean, you've got shallow waters, one color blue, and you get to deep water, it's a different color blue. Well, the sand here is one kind of tan, and then gets into a different kind of tan. And it kind of follows around where, the mountain ranges, kind of follows that shape. Okay, we scan for duraluminum, since that's the material that starship hulls are made of. And then we spot some, but it's moving. So we move in closer with our ship to follow it. Hjalmar sees a dune kind of collapse and a sand wave moving from that. So there's lots of discussion on what this is, and it's really worth trying to find out. Because, of course, we're joking the whole time about sandworms. Raymond catches sight of a wake as well. But at that time, Wes also sees the back of some kind of segmented creature. Back behind where Raymond is looking. So look at this gargantuan. Giant sandworms. So we decide we need to find out more about this, or at least get out of here. So we head over to Nightwing, which is an independent holding right on the edge of the desert in the mountains, south of the colonies, which is Lady Tamara's domain. So they're outside that domain. We swing. There's actually the tower itself, and it's got these little towers around with walls, right? And there's some kind of roof that goes from the main tower out over the other little towers. So the other little towers are covered, but they can still shoot out ballistas and catapults and stuff. And there's a path that leads up to a ramp, and then there's like a drawbridge that could drop down, and they got a portcullis, that kind of setup, right? So we swing around to the pathway, get down close enough to the ground, throw down the rope ladder. Runt stays on the ship, draws the rope ladder up, and the rest of us, head out. But as we're heading out, there's a greeting party that comes out of the keep to us, and it is Lord and Lady Cathal and Cheryl. Now, we have heard of Cathal and Cheryl before because we ran into a couple of their rangers up in the swamp. We've also met them previously in other social type events up at Hamlet. And Cheryl is a worshiper of Maliki. I don't know about Cathal, but Cheryl is. And there was some discussion, I think, at some point in the past between Cheryl and Wes. Well, anyway, they greet us. We enter the keep. The outer area, as soon as Wes steps into the outer area, he recognizes there are aspects of the orientation here defensively that are far beyond just medieval thinking. In fact, it's his ship's orientation skill that triggered this thought. This is how you set up inside a starship kind of thing, right? As soon as Ralph walks in, he goes catatonic. So Wes decides to stay with him. We all go inside. We find a room to lay Ralph down on so he can rest and recuperate. Wes stays with him because Wes wants to pepper him as soon as he comes through. What happened to you? Yeah, that kind of thing, right? Okay, so the rest of the party and Raymond go in. They meet with everybody. They bring up the giant sandworm thing, right? And Cathal and Cheryl, and people here, they have not seen any. But they do know of a cave south of here that has paintings, cave paintings like the ones in France with the animals and dancing around stuff, right? Cave paintings of giant worm or snake-like creatures. And somehow, something about water got introduced into the conversation. And we check our water supplies on the ship, that they've actually decreased more than they should normally have been for this time. And Cathal is going to mention that in the deep desert evaporates water at a much higher rate than normal. While they're messing around up there, Raymond spies a statue of Maliki. And then he comes to get Wes because he wants Wes to get involved with the Maliki thing. But it was there. He does stun relief on Rolf, which relieves him, so he's awakened. He becomes conscious, so Wes then asks, "Hey, what happened? Tell us, what did you happen?" And he says, "Oh, it was in a gym on a climbing wall. Does this always happen?" And the three of us, we all go back. Okay, so Raymond and Hjalmar go on a tour around with Cheryl. And Wes talks with Cathal about, things happening in the area. What's he heard. He shares some of his knowledge, that kind of thing. And he says that Molag, if you're watching live play, you can see the map that we show Molag there. It's south of Aklo, which is where we had been when we got messed up with the slavers. But Molag has been increasing their demi-human populations, and they've been moving their people out into these ruins. And in the mountains east and south of the swamp, right, there's still mountains. And it's north of the desert, right? It's the north edge of the desert, these mountains. And around and through part of these mountain ranges is this ruined forest. But it's actually a ruined fortress. We'll have to figure that out. Anyway, Molag's been recruiting, training, and then moving forces into this ruined area. And we talk about Aklo and slavery, and he says, the other thing about the Aklo slavery is they are bringing back ships, but the number of prisoners they have coming back don't match the numbers you would expect to see with these ships, right? And Wes then mentions that, there's dark elves out there going for slavery, and they've got this ship that actually submerges. And Cathal says something like, hey, Molag does have a relationship with he does say Molag does have a relationship with the Dark Elves. So if they're sharing slaves, that would explain the numbers that I'm seeing, or my people are seeing. And he asks, hey, is Telgar planning on doing anything? Not that I'm aware of, but, I'm trying to get things involved. And he says, someone should prompt Lady Tamara. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. And I mention, I have at times. I'm trying to expand the sphere of control and access. So that night we have a feast, and instead of having a high table and lords and knights and commoners and the peasants are in the kitchen eating, everybody's out in front. Just, normal tables. Everybody's treating each other essentially equally. And after we're pretty much done, Cheryl asks if our compatriot on the ship would like to have something to eat. And Raymond asks about having, if Emerald would mind riding on his shoulder. And so there's a little scan. What are you trying to do? He's thinking of having an Emerald guard the ship so we can bring Runt out. Well, that makes sense. So, hey, Emerald, would you mind being captain of the ship for the night? Keep it safe? And she agrees to that. So Raymond takes Emerald out, and she flies the rope ladder up and then goes up to the mast, and she's in charge. And then Runt comes to the tower. So Runt hangs out with the folks that are opposite of where Wes is because he wants to be more common. And people around Wes apparently are not common. And later on, Raymond holds worship services. Next day, we check our provisions. Sure enough, the water is down. We have just like a little bit over a day or so of water left. And all of the fresh fruits, all the fresh foods, perishables, are all like dehydrated. Okay, so we ask if they would mind provisioning us. They give us provisions for a week. We load up. They've got a guide to take us south to the cave. He manages to keep track of everything as we fly over there. And park the ship, have Emerald hold the rope ladder up, and come fly back down. And as we enter the cave, Rolf notices something unusual in the cave wall. As we look again, Hjalmar says, hey, this looks like this mark was made by a heavy blast machine gun on continuous fire. And we have to actually crawl underneath this block to get further into the cave. And, this block that we're crawling under, we start put together, is actually a stone beam of some sort. Worked stone beam. So someone took a mining laser to this thing. Anyway, we get into the caves. And on one of the walls is this crude cave painting of one huge, gigantic worm. And below it are people who are obviously worshiping it, right? Sarah thinks it's about 15,000 years old, maybe more. Further in, there are more paintings. Raymond kind of knows, hey, this looks like a starship in orbit. And some sign of starship battle. In fact, it shows a piece of the Taurus from space right here, kind of thing. We go further in, there's another chamber. And Ralph points out that, hey, this looks like a fight between two titans. It's kind of a storyboard. We got a male figure and a female figure. And the female figure appears to lose the fight and get thrown into space. Actually, some kind of a doorway in space, right? And there is an image of one of her allies being chained up. The victor's weapon, though, is fairly nondescript, except that there are these barriers around the female figure that the sword goes through the barriers, whereas arrows and other stuff don't. And the chaining of the defeated ally is some kind of a demonic figure and happens after the female is defeated. And after that, the weapon that won the fight for the male is thrown out into the void. And apparently, according to Cheryl, these are older than the other paintings. And the female figure does show some kind of representation that she's the regent of everything. And that is where we finished our game last night. Happy gaming.